Coming up on this week's show, we say goodbye to Internet Explorer.
A lost Sega game has been found.
And we chat text adventure history with Chris Ainsley.
This week's episode is brought to you by Beer52, the world's most popular craft beer discovery club.
Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 238, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
Me, Ravi Abbott.
And me, Joe Fox.
And welcome to this week's show, that best bit of the week, I think, just before the weekend, when we get to geek out for an hour or so about our favourite topic, retro video games. And I don't know about you guys, this really is the highlight of the week for me doing this.
I haven't got really much to look forward to at the moment, so this is my week.
I love the enthusiasm from Ravi. Yeah, for me, I absolutely love doing the show. Absolutely love it. And you know what else I absolutely love doing, Dan? I absolutely love doing our Patreon Hangouts.
Yes, but this weekend.
Yes, so I just wanted to get that out there because I know last time we kind of mentioned it like a few days before and we only had a couple of people on there. So get on there. Is it this Sunday?
This Sunday night, is it?
Yeah.
I love the fact as well that when we're on there, we're always kind of showing off things as well that we got. I mean, I was showing off my Apple Newton last time. I was just going to ask then, have any of you guys got anything new since the last Patreon Hangout? Obviously, Joe, you've got something quite significant in your life that's come along.
Yeah, I've got a brand new SNES. No, I haven't actually. I've got a brand new baby. I've got a brand new little girl who might come and hang out with us on the Patreon for a little bit while my wife gets some sleep. But I also do have a few SNES games that I'll probably be cataloguing, which I usually do when we're on there.
And they always go on really long, don't they?
Yeah. We always
just keeps talking.
What always makes me laugh is Dan never eats his dinner before it, and then he'll be like, "Wait, It's like 11 o'clock."
I've got dinner now.
I should actually learn to have dinner before, shouldn't I? I'll set the missus. I'll be done by about 9:30.
No, it happens.
11 p.m. It's in the fridge. Put it in the microwave. So I mean, it's always such a good laugh as well. We look forward to these coming up this weekend. If you're a patron, I'll post a link in our Patreon page. Click the link. We'll be on Sunday evening from 8 p.m. UK time. Now, this week we're going to be talking about probably the most traditional kind of video game, going way back in the day, talking about the purest kind of video game entertainment, text adventures. I love a good text adventure.
Yeah, I love a good text adventure. And you know what? I think it was a bit of a lost genre. It started off like really pioneering with mainframe computers and influenced a lot of people. But I think text adventures, they kind of went out of fashion for a while. But recently, we've seen a bit of a revival. I know we've been mentioning on this show quite a few new text adventures that have been coming out, all boxed with like extra add-ons and manuals and stuff. Well, this week we're going to be talking about the history of text adventures and its revival with Chris Ainsley, who's created Adventuron, which is basically a text adventure creation utility, but it's available on the web and on your mobile phone as well.
Because text adventures, I mean, you're right, they did kind of go probably out of vogue in the mid-'80s, I think, when obviously computers became powerful enough to do graphics. I mean, I do remember an era when it was still text adventures, but there was also kind of graphics at the top half of the screen before, the point-and-click
And then point-and-click came and kind of took over the whole adventure genre, really.
Yeah, I mean, I remember playing games like, Zork. I remember playing that, the old Infocom games, and Granny's Garden on the BBC Micro that did have graphics. But, I mean, that was kind of a text adventure game that, every kid used to play at school back then, and still one of the most terrifying games ever. We're talking about text adventures, though. I did remember something I'd forgotten until today. When I was a kid, my mum and I used to actually program video games in together from magazines. And I do remember that my auntie gave me a collection of these old programming mags called Input Magazine. And it was from like about 1982 to about 84. I got these in about maybe 89, 90. And I remember sitting with my mum and we programmed in a text adventure that span over, I think it was about 10 issues. It was absolutely massive. And then we got to the end of it and the thing didn't work. So even though we spent about like 6 weeks typing the bloody thing in. But I remember how, because before the days of like interpreters, they were really complicated games to program because it was kind of like the choose your own adventure books where you had to kind of take into account every eventual turn that the player would take and have all these different strands going on at once. And obviously the player could turn in any direction. It could interact in many different ways with different characters. So they're actually quite a complicated genre, I think, text adventures.
Yeah, and they've also got an element of something that we have missing from modern games, which is imagination. And
Yeah.
I think, when you're reading a book, you're painting a picture in your head. You're kind of using your own imagination. And it's exactly the same with text adventures. And I think that's really been lost from gaming.
I think it was Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, though, that kind of put me off text adventures, because as funny as that game was, I do remember it was, hilariously unfair. It'd be like, you spend about an hour in the game, then you brush your teeth, and it'd be like, oh dear, the house has collapsed on your head. Unfortunately, you're dead. It's like random things like that could set things off, but, they are just a brilliant genre. And I know you've been playing like some modern AI adventure games.
Yeah, I've been looking at this AI that's actually writing a text adventure game called OpenAI, which is a part of Elon Musk's kind of organization. And my God, it's hilarious. Some of the results are really funny.
So more on text adventures on the way with our special guest this week, Chris Ainsley. And speaking of the news, let's get straight into it this week then, because we have, it seems like we're talking about these every week at the moment, long lost games that have resurfaced again. But this one actually looks really special. We've got some footage of a cancelled Sega game that was set in the Sonic universe. And it kind of dates from that era in the early to mid-90s where it felt like we got a different platform game mascot coming along every couple of weeks. But this is a guy called Astropede, and it actually looks really good. Now, this is from a guy called Craig Stitt, who was actually an artist at Sega, and he was working on this game that they set in the Sonic 2 engine by the looks of it. And he's kind of an interesting looking character, I think.
Yeah, for me, he actually looks like a boss from like those early Sonic games. He looks like somebody you'd have to jump on to kind of like make sure each bit of his body disappears. But what's really interesting is, from looking at the footage and stuff like that and reading about it, is they actually kind of like whipped it up quite quickly, and they made it from a lot of the unused assets from Sonic 2 and some of the unused levels and stuff like that. But it's got a killer soundtrack. And it did look like a really kind of interesting concept, because of, rather than collecting rings, you collect parts of his body, which then make him bigger. But I'm not too sure of what the idea behind that was. Like, if you got hit, you'd lose a piece of body or something. But it looks really interesting, and I'm not too sure why it didn't come out, because, like you say, every other week there was a new platformer. So maybe that was the reason. They just said there was too many platformers, or something like that coming out. But I think it looks really interesting, and it had nice graphics set in the Sonic universe, so you couldn't have gone wrong.
Well, it seems to be like a rolling demo that's footage has been released of. We might see a ROM of it one day, who knows? But I'd say the physics look really good on it, really tight as well. Very much like a Sonic game, but more about balance and instead of just ramming and hitting stuff really fast.
What I thought was quite interesting as well was, when I first looked at it, it reminded me of Sonic Spinball. But according to this article, they actually then used some of the assets from this in Sonic Spinball.
Right.
So they made Sonic 2, then started making this from Sonic 2's unused assets, but then used some of those assets into Sonic Spinball, if that makes sense.
It's mad that we haven't heard of this before, because I thought, Sonic fans are really, really into their stuff, so they may have kind of researched it. But maybe this will get included in Sonic Mania, or who knows?
Who knows, yeah.
I think it would be nice to see a little Easter egg of him, in maybe a future Sonic game, because the difference, looking at this, I mean, some of the big differences from Sonic, like you said, he doesn't collect rings, he collects parts of his body. And I guess by the name, Astropede, he's meant to be like a centipede or a millipede or something like that. So he's actually, you look at the character, he's very long. Like you said, there are these levels that are designed for Sonic, and his body kind of gets lost behind some of the scenery quite a lot of the time.
I noticed that, yeah.
And it feels like, it probably will be quite easy to get hit, the longer your character is. And also he's got a gun as well, so he can kind of jump and shoot, which I guess kind of does give him a bit more protection over Sonic, for example. Yeah,
when I was watching the footage of it, I did think that kind of like, it made me like go, wait, what? That kind of thing. Because you just, from the look of the game and the feel and the vibe of it and everything, you'd thought, oh yeah, he's just going to jump on this guy. He's just going to, and then he just whips his gun out and starts shooting them. I was a bit like, oh, okay, fair enough.
So there is a video on it. It's about 12 minutes long, so there's quite a bit of the game that you can look at. It's been posted by Sega Bits. But I think, like you guys, I think it would be amazing if one day, this game does actually surface. And even if it's only a level or two, just getting, to play it would be incredible, I think. Now, let's talk about another story that's been all over this week. And there's something that I've got to admit did kind of make me smile a little bit, but I'm a bit torn on this one because it was something that I was never a fan of, and I probably only used it maybe once every 4 or 5 years when I got a new computer, generally to download another web browser. But this is Internet Explorer is being laid to rest by Microsoft after 25 years. They're killing it off.
20 years too late.
Yeah. I wonder if it knows it's, when they switch it off, whether it knows it's been switched off for a couple of weeks.
like it's gonna die slowly.
Yeah, it just doesn't know what's going on or anything like that. You know what? Everybody takes the piss out of Internet Explorer. I have to use it like every day for work. Like it's the browser on our laptops.
But
there's nothing I can do about it.
There's a reason you have to use it, and that was because Microsoft were basically knobs.
Yeah.
What they did was they basically went in there and packaged it with Windows. And the problem with Internet Explorer was it never fully adhered to web standards, and it had its own standards. They were trying to basically dominate and say, if we get Internet Explorer at number one, then these weird standards are going to kind of become the biggest thing. But as they did that, they destroyed Netscape.
Right.
And there was that great court case where Bill Gates is in the middle and they're doing a monopoly law case, and he's rocking up and down and he's trying to kind of get his way out of it. They actually won that.
He's acting like a petulant child, isn't he, all the way through it?
And they kind of won that case. But then Netscape turned into Mozilla, which then turned into Firefox and came around and kicked him in the arse. But the main thing is, I think that it sums up bad 90s practice to me, and bad kind of monopoly, and not really thinking about the users and the experience of the internet, more thinking about kind of dominating with software. Like, I used to love Netscape. I used to think it was one of the greatest browsers, and it was a little bit out of date then. It was about 2 years behind. Mosaic was about 5 years behind, and I never really used Mosaic. But when Internet Explorer came, it did become the default, but it really did hurt me. It was like, what are they doing? And it drove a lot of hate for Microsoft.
Have they given any sort of explanation to why they're doing this?
Because they've got Edge now.
Oh, fair enough.
And Edge adheres to to standards. And I think the reason that they've got Edge is because they've tried to rebrand Internet Explorer so many times, but its reputation is just really bad still. And even though they've got Edge, Internet Explorer still has about the same percentage of use as Edge does, because a lot of companies still use it. So they have to keep that Microsoft code in there, so it's like backwards compatible. But it's a lot more secure, Edge, and it's a lot better browser. But it's still nothing compared to Chrome.
Well, I think, you made a good point there, Ravi, that, they never adhered to web standards, which is why a lot of companies had to use Internet Explorer, because they made applications that only worked with
specific
IE.
ones. Yeah, proprietary. Yeah.
So that was why, a lot of companies were kind of locked into it. And it is still going to be a mode in Microsoft Edge. The IE code is still in there for legacy mode. But, there's that famous memo that you can look at online, the internet tidal wave, when Bill Gates finally got the internet and he realized actually this is going to be a thing in around 1994, it was, I think 94, 95. And, Netscape had I think it was an 80 or 90% market share in 1995. And then it was down to single digits by 1998. So Internet Explorer came along and just absolutely took over everything. But IE was always a web browser that your mum used.
But also, like, as a web designer as well, for years, WebKit, when it came out, was a blessing, because I'd have to write code, and then you'd have to write specific rules for IE.
Yeah.
So you'd do all your code, and then you'd be like, right, now let's do the Internet Explorer stuff. And it was really frustrating. There was no other browser that you had to do specific rules for.
But I will say one thing in Internet Explorer's defense. I mentioned before the fact that, to a lot of people, having that included with Windows actually opened the door to the web, that probably wouldn't have got on the web for a couple of years if it wasn't in there in Windows 95 and Windows 98. But also the fact that before that, web browsers were a paid-for product. Netscape cost $49.
Yeah, I think maybe if well, you can argue that it was included in the price of Windows, but if they'd not had IE on there, people would have just gone down and downloaded Netscape, or they would have gone to Mosaic as well, there probably would have been new versions of the other operating systems, and we'd probably still have like Mosaic today or something.
Well, the original Internet Explorer was based on Mosaic, I think, so kind of cobbled it together really quickly, to kind of be a Netscape competitor. IE, I mean, over the years, it did kind of get a bit better, but it was still...
Yeah,
I mean,
like stuff like Silverlight. Do you remember Silverlight and all those external plugins that you had to have? And then when it started to get extensions, and they were all really, really unsecure.
If I open the start menu and I kind of spot the little E with the swoosh around it, I do get a bit nostalgic, like, oh, look at that, that's quaint.
Yeah, you see, we were in different camps though, Dan. You were with the Windows 95 T-shirts and friends, and I was in the Amiga camp going, those buggers.
Oh, no, don't get me wrong, I still use Netscape even on Windows. I've never used IE. Always hated
I've
it.
even got a Netscape theme on my Firefox at the moment. I'm that sad.
You can actually there's a web browser today called SeaMonkey, isn't there, that actually looks like the old Netscape Navigator, but it's based
I think they got up to
Firefox.
like the final kind of versions. I think it's like Netscape 7 or something crazy like that.
Yeah, because I was using that a while ago, and it's got like Usenet reader and all that built into it still. That was, took me back a bit. But I remember even composing websites with like Netscape Composer and stuff like that back in the day. It was
also then
time.
you had Front Page as well by Microsoft, which was their editing program that no one used. Yeah, there was loads, but Netscape ended up changing, and they kind of took their code into the Mozilla Foundation, and that's basically saved it.
Yeah, so I think, it's obviously been a very interesting 25 years, and it does give me a bit of satisfaction to kind of see a bit of comeuppance. I imagine Mark Andreessen, the founder of Netscape, probably had a bit of a party at the weekend when...
I can imagine web designers around the world are going, yeah, IE's gone.
So rest in peace, Internet Explorer. You will not be missed by many. Now, here's a story that made Joe smile this week. One of your favourite games of all time, Zombies Ate My Neighbours. That's kind of getting a sequel now then.
Yeah, so anything to do with Zombies Ate My Neighbours, or Zombies as we know it in the UK, I just get so excited for it. It's one of my favourite games of all time. Whenever we talk about anything to do with it on the show, I always get really hyped about it. So it already did actually have a sequel, funny enough, which nobody seems to know about on the SNES, called Ghoul Patrol, which was pants. But there's a new kind of pseudo-sequel, spiritual successor coming out, which is called Demons Ate My Neighbours, which is expected to come out at the end of 2021. So we've got a while to wait for it. And so far, it's been confirmed it's coming out on Steam, and it is coming out on Switch. But essentially what this is there is a trailer for it, which I'm sure Dan will stick in the show notes, and it plays and looks just like Zombies Ate My Neighbours, but, with that kind of like hand-drawn, nice, smooth graphics. But you're not fighting zombies, you're fighting demons, kind of like in that kind of Evil Dead kind of vein. But what's really cool about it is it's by the developers Turned Out Games, who recently did the Toe Gem and Earl Back in the Groove, and it's set in 1991, so it looks very kind of like Tubular, of that kind of era. And it's all the kind of same weapons and stuff as Zombies Ate My Neighbours. So, like water guns and throwing fruit and apples and stuff like that. And the idea behind the game is it's a cursed videotape. And demons are coming out of people's TV sets. And it's up to you. You look like some sort of plumber to kind of like, or TV repair guy to kind of stop it. But what's really cool is on the 1st of September, they are launching a Kickstarter for it. So it is definitely already coming out on Switch and Steam, but they're doing a Kickstarter to get it to come out on Xbox Series X and PS5, which I'd be really excited about because I would like to kind of get a physical copy for it for whichever console I get. But the goal is $175,000, but they have said if they hit that, they're going to improve the game as it is coming out anyway. They're going to put more enemies in it, more levels, and just kind of like touch up the graphics and stuff like that.
And it's got good credentials behind this as well. I mean, he said, Turned Out Games. Human Nature Studios are involved as well. They did Toe Jam and Earl Back in the Groove. Obviously, we did an episode with those guys. But also looking at the people who've worked on the game, you've got T. Lopes on there, who was on, he worked on Sonic Mania.
Yeah.
And Wonder Boy as well, the new version of Wonder Boy. So you've actually got some people with great credentials in making successful retro-style games involved in this as well. I love the fact that it's going to have a local co-op mode too. Yeah. It's not just all online play.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something I'm excited about because it's something, I can sit down and play with my friends or sit down and play with my wife and, shout at her when she uses all our lives with the 5 levels. And it's just something I miss. You just don't get that with modern games. So, like I say, I'm always super excited for anything to do with Zombies Ain't My Neighbours.
It's got that kind of Hawaii shakedown, modern retro kind of look as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I love that modern retro look. And a lot of games are doing it recently, but I think a lot of games are nailing it as well recently. Like, it doesn't look pants.
It looks very green.
Yeah. There's a lot of. It does look quite green. There's a lot of like slime and stuff like that, but there's a lot of like outdoor levels and stuff. But the graphics. I don't want to, because I'm always excited about these things. They don't look amazing at the moment, but I'm sure that's not the final product.
Well, it's kind of got that kind of the B movie kind of style as well that Zombies Ain't My Neighbours had. That the kind of intro text and all that looks like it could be like a 50s B movie and stuff. So I mean, always getting like something new that kind of follows on from classic games like that is an exciting thing, I think. So maybe we can do an episode with those guys in the future if we can get them on.
I was actually thinking that as we were talking about it. As I was rambling on there, I was like, oh, we could get them on.
Get on it, Joe.
I'll get on it.
Now, obviously, we're going to be talking about text adventure games in a moment. Something you've been playing this week, then. This is an open AI-based text adventure game that essentially learns as you play.
Yeah, well, I haven't actually been able to play it because I haven't been able to get into it yet. But this is really interesting. What it is we've been looking at artificial intelligence playing old school games. So Google DeepMind was a great example of that. And there's a few of these kind of huge artificial intelligence machines out there. And OpenAI is one, which is funded by Mr. Elon Musk as well. And they have a thing called Generative Pre-trained Transformer 3, which is an autoregressive language model. But it basically uses deep learning to produce human-style text. So there's a program called AI Dungeon, which is a free adventure game, text adventure game. And what they've done is they've managed to implement this kind of AI into that adventure game to create stories. And there's an article on Gizmodo at the moment about how weird these stories are. When you've got AI writing something, it's not being able to do it like a human and kind of get the ideas of surroundings or expression in there. Like if you've ever read erotica written by AI, it's one of the funniest things that you've ever heard in history because it actually makes no sense. There's loads of like AI poetry out there as well. But
I haven't read AI erotica, but I will be later. Now that you've said that, I really want to see that.
Me and Dan are going to read it together.
That's not going to get us talked about, Joe.
And
in this story here on Gizmodo, there is actually a little excerpt from the auto-generated text and stuff. It's like a woman found a human skull in her garbage can. Upon arriving, you notice the damp dirt clings to the skull, making it seem as if someone dug it up recently. The lower jaw is missing, and only 2 teeth remain. There's a hole about the size of a quarter in the middle of the forehead. So actually, it is coming up with like stories.
Yeah, it's coming up with stories, but then like the linking and like the descriptive stuff will go a bit weird, and then you'll be like, what? And it will start to feel a bit surreal or like it's been written by a kid.
That felt quite surreal then, just like it's just that little excerpt. Then I was like, ooh, like thinking about it.
What happens next?
Yeah, like, oh my God.
The stories are unlimited as well because it's auto-generated. So literally every time you're going to use it, it's going to be a new, completely random story of something that you can't think of at all that this AI is going to produce.
It's crazy.
So did these games have endings then, or is it kind of like the story will just go on forever?
I don't know. Yeah, maybe it might like set goals that you have to achieve, but you might not know what the goals are, or they might be abstract. Who knows? I need to get on it. But at the moment, you can't get on it. You need to register and then kind of pay for subscription on this AI dungeon. But I'm going to get part of it and have a go. It looks really good fun. I was playing an AI dungeon version of the Tiger King earlier, which was quite funny, talking about, that TV show on Netflix.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like, you've got to cut costs, get rid of all your staff. And I was like, hire local teenagers.
Shoot some tigers.
Yeah.
Hire some crackheads.
A lot of these are like web-based, and that one you were playing is
that's web-based. You could get it for Android as well.
I've always found AI procedural games interesting. I remember, a really basic example of that. Did you ever use a program called Eliza?
No.
This was, I think it was on the Commodore 64 and other platforms like that. I had a version on the Amiga as well, and I think it came on a cover disc. So essentially what this was an artificial intelligence counselor. So it would ask you, like, how are you feeling today? And you'd be like, a bit down in the dumps, had a stressful day. And it would look at, like, keywords in there. What was stressful about your day? And it would, it kind of go through and kind of counsel you based on these, responses that you'd given to it. Obviously, it was very basic, being that this was, I think it was actually made in the 70s originally. But even the foundations of it back then, I found that, the machine's kind of learning from what you were telling it. And obviously its vocabulary would build up the more words you gave it. I always found that really interesting. But
did it reassure you in the end? Change your mood?
Exactly. Yeah, come out all jolly afterwards. Oh, thanks, Eliza. What a great day I'm going to have now. Yeah, if you're ever feeling down, pop that disc in. It'll put you in the best mood. But yeah, I mean, this kind of stuff, using AI for just kind of these unlimited stories, that could just go on forever. I think it's a really good use of it. So I'm sure Ravi can find a few examples we can put in the show notes if you want to try out some web-based AI games. Now, before we chat all about text adventures with our special guest this week, Chris Ainsley, this looked quite cool. This is a thing called the App Boy. Essentially, you can build your own tiny retro gaming console.
Yeah, this is awesome. It's like a little PCB, basically, and it's got all the sections for the components. You can put them in, solder it yourself. You've got a OLED screen, but also you can use an Arduino to kind of program it. And I saw that they were playing Asteroids on it and quite a few nice little items.
Yeah, I see Space Invaders running on it here as well. I've got to admit, this does look very, very street. If you want to look hardcore with this, you're essentially holding a PCB with a couple of switches on it, and the chips are all exposed and everything, and it's not in a case or anything.
I was just thinking I'd cut my fingers up on this, trying to play it, or you put it in your pocket and you go to pull it out, and it's just like caught on all the threads or something from your jeans.
Yeah, you snag some solder on the bottom of the USB port.
Yeah, I think it's like fully homemade kind of board, and you can basically print them yourself. The PCBs, and then get the parts list and kind of build it. But maybe people will make cases in the future. It's got cool stuff like a micro USB port as well. It's got little LEDs on there, so it might be customizable. You could add some fat speakers on there, a big sub. Who knows?
And if it's Arduino based, I guess you can run like emulation platforms and stuff on it.
Yeah, you can program on it. Like, it'd be good to get Pico 8 or something on there, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I remember being at school and like building little radios and, Morse code transmitters and stuff like that.
Yeah, little kits,
I'd love to have built this at school. This looks awesome. Kind of making your own Game Boy. Never thought I'd see the day when you can do that. Looks really good. So if you want to check that out, that'd be a good little hobby project to do on the weekend. It doesn't look that complicated either, actually, which I think is quite good.
Yeah, it's all laid out really simply. There's you can't actually see the traces really on the front one. You can follow them, but they've all been painted over. And it's by a guy called Arnav Sharma.
Yes, I'd get one of these and just wouldn't show anyone my soldering on the back. Yeah, just don't turn it round. So if you want to find out how to get one of those, we'll put that and everything else we talked about this week in our show notes at theretrohour.com. Now, we'll do our Hall of Fame in just a minute, remind you how you can get involved in our Patrons Hangout that's coming up this weekend too. Before we do that, let's give a huge thank you to one of our favourite companies in the world who have supported this week's episode of the Retro Hour podcast and actually supported this show for a couple of years now. Really good friends of ours, our good mates at Beer 52. Now, we all go warm and cosy when we hear the words free beer. And of course, with it being this time of year now, coming towards the end of summer here in the Northern Hemisphere, not many days left to go out in the garden and soak up the sunshine, but we want to get you involved in this right now. Get your own case of Beer 52, 8 craft beers, sourced and curated from the best breweries on the planet for free. Now, all you got to do is head to this website right now, tap this in your phone, beer52.com/retro. All you have to do is cover £5.95 for the postage, and they will send you 8 free craft beers in the post on us. And of course, for doing that, you'll be helping out the podcast as well. And us three guys, we all like a drink now and then, and we're all big fans of Beer 52 as well.
It's pretty much a case of beer. I was surprised about how long it lasted. It's a really good deal though. And you can get like dark or light beers as well, and it comes with a magazine and a snack.
And every month you get it as well, there's like something different to surprise you in there as well, because they often do different themes. Like I got one that was like beer from New Zealand. There's like a South African case that they sent. It's stuff that, you normally wouldn't think of trying, but actually it opens your mind to a lot of new stuff. And obviously they do European beer. They're really passionate about the UK craft beer scene as well. And they're actually the world's most popular craft beer discovery club with over 150,000 members and growing. And they will send you a brand new case every month. And like Ravi said then, if dark beer is not your thing, choose a light option. And you also get their award-winning beer magazine Ferment and a tasty snack included as well. So if you change your mind or you want to pause or cancel, you can do that anytime, no obligation. But if you'd like to get your free case right now, you can claim it by going to beer52.com/retro. Get your first case of 8 beers for just £5.95 postage. beer52.com/retro. Thanks to our very good friends at Beer 52. So Patrons Hangout coming up this weekend. And of course, if you want to support this podcast, a really good way to do that is by nipping onto our website, theretrohour.com, and clicking on that little supporters tab. And we have lots of different tiers on our Patreon. I mean, essentially, you can help out this show and make sure it keeps going into the future for, I think our lowest tier is $4 a month. That is like, a Starbucks coffee or something, isn't it? In many parts of the world. So for just $1 a month, you could help out this show and keep it going. And of course, you will get a mention in a future episode on the Retro Hour Hall of Fame. Like this week, thank you so much to Alexandra Fillion,
Oscar Jacobson,
Chris Hull,
Patrick Breger,
and Leah Pansumo,
who all made donations into the running of the show. And if you'd like to help us out, of course, at the moment, we're getting our home studios kitted out as well. I've made a little shopping list that is really going to help out with this show. It will mean that Joe doesn't have to lie on the floor in his gaming room with a 13-year-old laptop and a USB microphone to do this show.
You sound like I live in like a cave and like I'm squatting. I don't have
expect an improvement in sound quality in the next couple of weeks, I'd say.
You'll be able to hear the water dripping off the walls in Joe's dark dungeon that he has to do the show from.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your help, guys, so far. And if you'd like to join us on Sunday night, of course, the link will be in our Patreon at theretrohour.com. Right, then let's talk about text adventure games with this week's special guest. Chris Ainsley is next on the Retro Hour podcast. You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and it's time to welcome on this week's very special guest. Now, we're going to be talking about a topic that I think is, really going back to roots of video games and games that really use your imagination, and a genre that was kind of forgotten for a few years but has actually had a bit of a resurgence recently. We're going to be talking about the text adventure with the creator of Adventuron, Chris Ainsley. Welcome to the Retro Hour podcast.
Hello.
Great to have you on, Chris. Now, before we get into the kind of the history of text adventure games and the projects that you're working on these days, I mean, where did it kind of all begin for you then? Do you remember your earliest text adventure experience?
It's a little bit hazy. It was either The Hobbit, which I remember the family went on a shopping trip down to the local Comet, and we got this really expensive game for the Spectrum, which had a book inside. So that The Hobbit was a very early experience, but it could have been Smuggler's Cove as well, which was a game with a much smaller cassette by Quicksilver. So it was either one of those two.
What memories do you have of those then?
Well, The Hobbit was a really kind of family communal experience. So the family would play it together. And I remember us all getting stuck trying to climb into the barrel in The Hobbit. And my mother just brings up The Hobbit all the time because she absolutely loved that adventure.
Well, we've heard from a lot of our guests that the roots of text adventures and video games were based on Colossal Cave's adventure, and that was on the PDP-10 mainframe. So how important was that title?
Well, I think it was extremely important because it was really the first adventure game. So it established the rules of the genre, how to navigate, how to pick up objects, how to solve puzzles. It was a verb-noun style adventure game, and pretty much everything that followed on from the Colossal Cave adventure.
And that was by Will Crowther, wasn't it? And it ended up getting ported to many other mainframe systems.
Yes, yeah. It was a revelation on campus. I understand. I was a bit too young to go through that myself, but it was really kind of a rite of passage to port adventure.
It's really weird to think that game came out of a kind of caving enthusiast making a game about exploring caves, and then that kind of this whole genre.
It was based on a real cave cluster, I understand, and it was mapped before it was coded.
It's interesting to think how much money these like early text adventure games universities were spending, because obviously those mainframes weren't cheap to run. Yeah, they must have cost millions actually for people to play these games back then, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody was playing these games in their own home. They would have to go to university, and they would have to go to the science lab to play these games. So a lot of people were kind of sneaking into the campuses at night to play these games.
Well, if we're talking about text adventures, we were mentioning before in the start of the show that really, I mean, text adventures, like I said before, it's a pure kind of gaming. We kind of equate it to, reading a book as opposed to watching a movie, because it really uses your imagination. And what kind of skills did text adventure fans develop back then? Obviously, I mean, I imagine hand-drawing maps was probably a thing.
Yeah, I think in the early days, because there was no graphical representation of maps, it was part of the fun to explore the world, to draw the maps. And the game makers really experimented with navigation. So they often had crazy ways of navigating between locations. So you go east to a location, and then to get back to the same location, you might need to go southwest. So there were some really crazy maps that came out with that, but that was part of the fun in that era.
Well, Scott Adams' Adventure was the first text adventure game for micros. How many standards did that game set?
I think it was probably the most important game. After Adventure, it really just set the standard, because Scott Adams was trying to fit this huge mainframe game into 16 kilobytes of memory. So essentially, he had to reduce the game down to the most minimal components: locations, objects, puzzles, and just boiled it down to like, where am I? What am I carrying? What's here? And what can I do to transform the environment? So he really invented the modern text adventure game, at least until Infocom came along a little bit later.
And he created the parser, right? So what is a parser?
A parser is something that takes text that you enter into a computer and turns it into some internal representation. In the early days, Scott Adams' parser was really just looking at either one word or two words. So you could navigate using north and south. That would be one word, or two words like a verb and a noun. So get, apple, throw, coin, words like that. So a parser would just turn text into a verb and a noun, essentially.
And that would help it kind of fit on this really small size.
Yeah, because then you could essentially tokenize. You could just turn these words into numbers. Then you could have a little statement in there saying, if it's this number in this scenario, then do this. And it helped to shrink down the code.
So I was talking before on the show about an adventure game that my mum and I tried to program when I was a kid, and it was we literally put like every different variant of what the player could do into the basic code, and it ended up being massive, and then it didn't work at the end. But I imagine when parsers came along, having that really made sense, because I always wondered like how did it kind of take into account all the different options that a player might go for, and how did they have all these different variables in there?
Well, I mean, there are some tricks. The first is that if you limit your nouns, then the player is not going to try something on something that doesn't exist in the scene. So if you don't list a giraffe in the scene, then the game doesn't have to respond to anything with a giraffe in. So you limit your nouns to just things that you want the player to do. And that actually helps the player because it gives them a scope of the game. And I mean, you also have catch-all statements. So if you examine something that isn't there, you see nothing special. So whether something is there or whether something isn't there, it'll say you see nothing special. And that's a great way of saving memory, because it's just a catch-all statement in case it's something you didn't code.
And outside of the kind of pioneers and elite coders and guys using the university mainframe, I guess this was the first exposure, Adventureland, for many people, being on like the TRS-80 and the Spectrum and all these different machines. Yeah,
I imagine so. Again, I'm a little bit too young to have gone through that myself, but it must have been a revelation to get that in your home environment, to have it on your own television screen or have it on your own monitor. And it was ported to pretty much every platform. I mean, there's a version for the Spectrum, a Commodore 64, Apple II. It was a really seminal text adventure game.
Well, when I was a kid, I used to read these choose your own adventure books where you'd get to the end of a chapter and it'd be like, you can pick your options. And if you do this, go to page 100. If you do this, go to page 150. I mean, is it kind of a connection with text adventures and physical game books?
I think there is, in that it's certain types of text adventures and narrative experiences. And of course, game books are the same kind of narrative experience, but it's very limited because you have a prescribed set of things that you can do. You have prescribed interactivity, whereas you have this kind of blue sky approach in parser-based games. You can try anything. you can really be creative with your verb and your noun. And I know it doesn't seem like that, but it just seems more freeing. Like the world is, you can try anything. Whereas in the games with fixed options, such as game books, you can't really do that. It's very enjoyable, but it's not quite as flexible.
And it seems like a bit of a kind of experience. You know, I used to play text adventures with my friend sitting next to me, and a game book I'd probably do solo or sit on my own. So there's variables kind of, you know, it's always good to have a different set of eyes on there. And yeah, I could imagine it being really kind of limited with just the physical game book.
Well, the physical game books often had other mechanics in there as well, like roll a dice and have a battle, and if you win the battle, turn to this page. If you lost the battle, turn to this page. And you know, when I used to play those games, I used to cheat. It's like I always win the battle. Or I don't know. If
read
anybody
it backwards.
Yeah, or you know, stick your thumb in the page. And those types of games, they're very fun, and it's really just about learning where the dead ends are. You can read it as a story, and I think that maybe other people do read those things as a story, but I was just trying to game the system, right? I just want to be successful. I just want to make my way through the book. So maybe I wasn't the best player, but I really enjoyed those books.
Well, obviously, Zork was a game changer and generally regarded as the first interactive fiction game. What's the difference between an interactive fiction and a plain adventure game, then?
Oh, well, I'm pretty opinionated about this. Interactive fiction is really a story that you're a part of. So you can read it as essentially there's a narrative and you're in a world and you describe the actions, and then the game actually reads back the response to your actions. And later Infocom games really bought into that concept of this is an interactive book, an interactive story. It was way more interactive than earlier text adventures with more limitations. But Zork wasn't quite like that. It was more anachronistic. It was more similar to Colossal Cave that came before it. But Infocom was really into this branding of interactive stories, and their parser was ahead of everybody at the time. And I think it's, you know, even into the 90s, it was still ahead of everybody else. They were 10 years ahead of the curve.
And that really, you're right, it does root back to Colossal Caves as well, doesn't it? And the old Fortran days and PDP-10.
Yeah, it's I mean, their technology was so far ahead of everybody else's. They had a full portable virtual machine that they were running. And the problem with the Infocom approach is that it required more expensive machines. So if you had a Spectrum, you didn't see Infocom games on the Spectrum because Spectrum games, at least until Plus 3 came along, they loaded from tape. So you needed one of those posh machines to play Infocom games, and I kind of missed out.
Well, if we're talking about, you know, those kind of early days of text adventures on micros, I mean, like I said, Infocom, massive company. Obviously, Sierra were the other big name in adventure games as well. I mean, how important were these companies to text adventure development then back then?
Very important. I'd say Sierra, Scott Adams, Sierra, and Infocom were the granddaddies of the industry, because Sierra, they really introduced the concept of text adventures plus graphics, and they weren't really graphic adventures in those days because they were graphical text adventures. You went into a location and you see the location in primitive vector graphics, but at least you could see it and you could interact with it and you could do things like that. And Sierra were really the first company to play around with those ideas. And then, of course, Sierra went on to hybrid parser type games, the early police quests, where you could move character around the screen, but you would have to type commands. And that gave you, I think, the best of both worlds. There are new games coming along that have this hybrid approach. There's a game called The Crimson Diamond by Julia Minamata, I think. I hope I get the name right. But that's a game that's coming along, I think, next year. And that's adopting the same kind of Sierra approach of hybrid parser games. Infocom, of course, I mean, they made text adventures commercially viable, and you can't really underestimate their impact on the industry.
Do you think there's like a defining point where they went to those kind of hybrid games and there's still some text adventure purists that are like, we kind of lost something when we got the visuals?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the games of that era were very, very primitive. So the graphics were probably not as good as many people's imaginations, and they think, we don't need this. Why do we need this? For other people, they just think, oh my God, I can see the world now. I can see it. And I love it because it's bright and vibrant and happy. So you gain something and you lose something, I think.
The game that, you know, when I was a kid, that was a massive impact on me was Granny's Garden on the BBC Micro, which it was an educational game, but again, it was an adventure game. And when that that graphic at the end popped up when the witch got you. It was like, to this day, I have nightmares about that.
Yeah, me too.
Dan wakes up screaming.
Yeah, and the kind of jagged teeth, and just the idea that there's a witch that is somehow stalking you in this world. It just terrified me as a child. But it was exciting.
And all she did is send you home when she caught you. She didn't even burn you or anything up in the cauldron.
I mean, a Granny's Garden is not really a text adventure, but it is kind of an interactive. It is kind of an interactive fiction style game, I would say.
So another game that I remember playing loads as a kid, and it was hideously unfair, was Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And obviously that was a really famous franchise, the Douglas Adams story, coming into a text adventure game. And I mean, was there many cases of that, kind of established franchises then realising that actually there's a genre here that is quite popular now, and we could actually put our stories out as text adventures?
I think there was an era where that was happening. There were stories like Hitchhikers, but there were other games like... Robin of Sherwood, which was based on the TV show, and then one of my favorite games is The Famous Five, which was based on the first book in the Famous Five series. So there were certainly kind of tie-ins that were happening in the mid to late 80s, but they kind of died out with the commercial viability of text adventure games, unfortunately, because it'd be great. I mean, I would absolutely love it if when a movie came out, there was a text adventure version of that movie, but it doesn't tend to happen these days.
Yeah, and it got to the stage where, a lot of movies and TV shows ended up becoming like platform games in the late 80s and early 90s, and you thought that would have made a great adventure game instead.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of movies that are about story, and you can't really accurately portray that with a 16-bit platformer. But unfortunately, there just wasn't financial viability to turn those games into text adventures. And these days, it would be great if certain rights holders would turn a blind eye, or they would say, it's okay for fan text adventure games to be made of these, provided they don't pay a fee. But unfortunately, that just doesn't happen. I mean, I've actually tried myself to get the rights to certain IPs just to do a free adventure, but no.
Can you imagine like a Doctor Who or like even a Red Dwarf text adventure?
Oh, it would be absolutely brilliant.
Player One. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it would be absolutely brilliant. I mean, do the Star Wars text adventure game, but the rights are not available, unfortunately.
Well, I remember a piece of software called The Quill, and you worked with Tim Gilbert at one point. That was a text adventure creation tool. How much influence did that have on you?
Well, I think it had a significant influence on me and pretty much anybody else that played text adventure games on the spectrum in the 80s. There was this whole kind of homebrew text adventure creation scene in the 80s, and that was really centered around this tool, the Quill, that was actually made by Graham Yandel, but Tim Gilbert's published it and ran with it, and he produced all the subsequent versions of that software. So Tim is really the granddaddy. He's the person who saw that self-publishing was the future long before other people were tinkering with the same idea. So you had thousands of adventures that really can be attributed to Tim publishing the Quill. And it just made text adventures very easy for non-programmers to write.
I remember doing one myself, which was based in the Houses of Parliament, and you were running around there. We'd be able to do really rude ones as well. We'd always be right.
Trust you.
Really rude text adventures for ourselves.
Did you ever write a text adventure as a kid then, Chris? Was it when did you try writing your own?
Actually, the first time I wrote a text adventure was with Adventuron. I had the Quill when I was younger, but I just wasn't that creative, unfortunately. I just ended up making a game of my house, which I think a lot of people ended up doing in those days. So really, the first time that I've written a text adventure was about 2 years ago. And I think I've got a lot better since I was a child, but yeah.
Well, what are the more unusual text adventure games that you've found? And are there any really weird titles?
Yeah, there are quite a few. There's a game called Trolley Mania by Gareth Pitchford, and you basically have to collect trolleys for a supermarket. It's so mundane, it's brilliant. And there's a game called Untitled Bowerbird Game, and this is by Benjamin and Ellen Rageb. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And that's about collecting shiny items to attract a mate. So that's pretty fun. But the one that's kind of sticks in my mind and a lot of people's mind is Jaws, the text adventure game, which is that you're the shark and you have to kind of swim around the beaches and eat the various tourists in the sea. So that's kind of silly.
That sounds wicked from the shark's perspective.
From the shark's perspective, yeah.
Well, that adventure games obviously morphed into point-and-click games when, the late 80s and the 16-bit machines kind of came around. Actually, a bit before that with like Zap McCracken and games like that. Why do you think the text adventure declined then? Do you think it was just due to the more graphical prowess of those machines?
I think it was that the market stayed stagnant for for textual games, but it was growing for everything else. So technology was moving forward and everybody was into graphics. That just seemed to be the logical progression. Text-only adventures stayed around, but I don't think the mass market followed text-only adventures. After Infocom stopped publishing, then I think there wasn't much commercial viability left.
What about your personal history? Did you kind of stick with text adventures and kind of keep playing ones you could find? Or?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I had my Spectrum until the early 90s, and then I had a Sam Coupe after that. So I really had these kind of lower spec machines. So I was buying homebrew software from Zenobi. So Zenobi was still, I think it was the last publisher that was publishing for the Spectrum commercially. So they was publishing up to about 96 or 97. And so I was buying text adventures from Zenobi.
It was interesting because we were talking about that time period recently, and it was a bit of a resurgence after when mobile phones came in with the smaller screens and stuff like the Nokias. Like it was just text, and there was games like on WAP and stuff like that. It would have been fantastic if there was a kind of text adventure revival then. Yeah,
it would have been, but I think the screens were still a little bit too small. You could have probably done a Scott Adams style adventure game using those screens, and probably some people did miss a trick by not doing that. But I think even in those days, it was pretty difficult to type in the text to a sufficient degree that it would be an enjoyable experience.
Yeah, it would have been all predictive text, actually.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I think it would have worked, but you would have had to. You couldn't just dump Colossal Cave Adventure on there. You would have to adapt it to the screen.
And I could do pretty quick sentences with that. It was a T9 keyboard, wasn't it? I was a whiz on my Nokia 3310, I must admit.
Yeah, well, 3310 was a brilliant phone.
Even in the 90s, I remember the public domain scene kind of kept text adventure games alive somewhat, didn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Graham Nelson created a tool called Inform, and that was created in the early 90s. And Graham just keeps going. He's produced Inform 1 to 7. I think 7 was released in 2006, and it's brilliant from a technical perspective, absolutely brilliant. And I think that really helped the community survive. And there are yearly competitions that mostly revolve around Inform and some of these other non-parser-based interactive fiction systems.
So today, text adventures have kind of seen a bit of a comeback, and obviously we're going to get into Adventuron in just a moment. Why do you think that now seems to be the time when people are kind of rediscovering this genre?
It's probably just what is old is new again. Everybody's forgotten about text adventure games, so if something's so old that you don't know it, then when you discover it again, it's brand new. So I think it's just one of these things that if you really want to get it into making a game, why not make the simplest kind of game that you can conceive of? And a text adventure game is pretty easy to write. It's not easy to write a good one, but it is easy to write one. So I think that's part of the reason. The other part is that the tools are just getting better. So Adventuron is one tool, but there are many other tools that are improving at the moment, and there are more options than ever, I would say.
Are these game jams or gaming competitions helping just get loads of titles out really quickly?
I think so. I mean, there's been an annual competition, IF Comp, that occurs every year, and this generally is based around more narrative-focused games. But the Adventuron game jams are kind of more focused on anachronistic kind of games that you might have encountered in the late 70s and early 80s. So the Adventuron game jams are kind of keeping that side of things up, I think.
Well, let's talk about Adventuron then. I mean, for people that might not be familiar with it, give us kind of the background on it, where the idea came from and why it was needed and what it does.
Well, it was never really intended to be a text adventure system. Originally, it was going to be a gamebook engine, and it was a technology demo. I'm a software developer, and I was developing some language-based technology, and I needed a demo that was business agnostic. So I thought, wouldn't it be fun if I made a gamebook engine? And it kind of morphed into Adventuron, which then became a parser engine, and now Adventuron is actually going back to being a hybrid and gamebook engine as well. So it really just came from, I need a technical demo, but then once I had it, it was so fun to iterate over that, and I could see the benefits for education. So I really leaned into the education side of it's a really interesting way to learn to code.
Well, part of that learning to code is having examples, and Excalibur is actually built into the game. So you bought the rights. So why was that game so important to have there as a built-in kind of tutorial?
I think it was just important to have a game that was simple for beginners to play. So Excalibur was a game that I bought from my local pet shop in Thornaby. I guess it would have been about 87 or 88. And it had these rich, vibrant graphics. And as you do things inside the game, the graphics change. So you had this interactivity. And I just really enjoyed the experience as a child. So I thought, well, if that was my experience as a child, then why don't I just, bet on that horse? Because I already know that's pretty good for children. So, I contacted Alternative, purchased the rights, and worked that into the Adventuron tutorial.
And I think, the idea of having a text adventure creation system on modern systems is an amazing thing to have. How do people go about making a game in Adventuron then, and what can it run on?
So it's very easy if you have a desktop-based browser, because it actually requires a keyboard to do the coding. I could have built mobile menus, but it's a lot more work. As long as you have a desktop browser, you just go straight to the website, and essentially you have a canvas, and you press Control and Space, which is autocomplete. And it will just essentially give you a tutorial on the left-hand side. You follow the steps, and at the end of the tutorial, you've built a genuine 1980s text adventure game, Excalibur. There are shorter tutorials as well, but essentially you have 3 panels: tutorial panel on the left, coding panel in the middle, and play your game on the right. And that's how it works.
And is it a custom language then that it's working in? Or?
Yes, it's working in this custom object notation language, which was something I developed prior to Adventuron, which I just thought would work for this particular problem.
And I imagine it makes making your own adventure game a lot easier than trying to do it in BASIC or something back in the day.
Yeah, I think you can go very far, very fast with Adventuron. You probably hit your head on the ceiling if you're really trying to do something extraordinarily complex, and Adventuron will get more powerful, but it's at least as powerful as the Quill, and probably a lot more powerful in many ways.
Well, we've seen lots of titles coming out, and one of them was a Spooky Adventure, and you've worked with Horsenberger, who does some absolutely amazing teletext style art. Can you tell us more about this, and do you think we'd see any teletext crossovers in the future?
I love teletext graphics. In the wintertime, I loved those advent calendars that you used to get on, Channel 4, and you press reveal. I absolutely love those style of graphics. So I was following Horsenberger for a while, and I wanted to make a text adventure with some interactive graphics, and I just thought teletext and the old kind of BBC style font. So I contacted Steve. He put together some graphics, and I essentially just thought of spooky scenes that I wanted to have in a game. And then once I had the graphics, I thought, okay, now I have to make a game around the graphics. So that's how the adventure really just started with the graphics. And then I just thought, well, okay, make a game.
And it's that kind of BBC Micro Mode 7, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The teletext mode.
Yeah, it looks gorgeous, actually. I mean, I was quite surprised how good it looks, but I think that's really down to Steve, and it's really down to the author of the font, Andrew Bullhuck. I think he made the Mode 7 font. Brilliant.
Well, have you seen any other titles coming out on Adventuron, and have you been impressed by them?
Yeah, I mean, there have been a lot of amazing games coming out. It depends what type of game you like. There are some very nice treasure hunt games. There's Treasures of Hollow Hill by John Blythe. The recent competition was won by D. Cook, and it's a game called One More Thing. There are roughly about 70 to 80 adventure games now written in Adventuron, and just trying to think what my favorite is. I couldn't pick a favorite because I run these jams, and certainly couldn't pick a favorite.
Are there any that we should look out for, and any that you'd recommend people try first?
If you just want to understand, want to have a fun experience, then I would try one of the TALP adventures first, which is Excalibur. It has a built-in tutorial. So if you're introducing text adventure games to children, for example, use one of the TALP games, Text Adventure Literacy Project, And that will talk you through all the basics of how to play a game, how to go north, how to go south, how to look in your pockets, get things, solve puzzles. So I think that those games are more enjoyable for children. For adults, maybe The Beast is a good game, and that's a part of a game from 1988 by Linda Doty.
So you mentioned the Text Adventure Literacy Project, which I know you're behind. Can you tell us a bit more about that then? What is it and where did the idea come from?
Well, the idea just came from, I wanted to make an easy way for people to search for adventures that were suitable for children. Given that modern audiences don't know how to play text adventure games, it's nearly impossible to find a text adventure game that assumes zero knowledge. So just basically adding TALP in the description of your text adventure game would make it easy to find those games. And to be one of those games, you have to have an adventure that essentially teaches you the basic fundamentals, how to go north, south, pick up. It has to have graphics. It has to be something that would be engaging for a first-time player of text adventure games that has no prior knowledge.
Do you find that people's attention span has kind of changed? Because I remember when I was a kid, I would sit there typing in open space door. I'd go through every single command. And do people give up easier these days?
Probably. I think that's probably true. So there is more onus on designing these games in a better way. So part of that is making sure that you have a good pool of beta testers and just seeing what silly things they type and making sure that you have a response for everything people type. Some people might not type anything silly. They might type in something quite clever, a different way to solve a puzzle. So Adventuron actually has a transcript feature where you can provide your game to a tester, and you can basically look at the log with their permission. Of course, they have to email you the log, so it's their active choice to send you that. But providing they do, you can study that and you can improve your adventure game. And I think if you don't do that, if you just assume the player is going to type this and type this and type this, they're not going to type exactly what you want them to type. So if the game doesn't respond to what the player is typing, it tends to be a boring game.
And I think, I remember really frustrating experiences playing text adventure games as a kid. And you'd be like, go west. And you can't do that. But if you put walk west, it would. Having to write the exact syntax and the exact wording that the programmer had in mind was incredibly frustrating on some of those early games.
Yeah, I think that's down to the primitive parsers of the past. Adventuron doesn't really have that problem, and I think most modern engines don't have that problem anymore. But there are other things like maybe the game is expecting 4 words and you type in 2 words, and it doesn't imply the additional 2 words. So there are lots of ways in which the parser will trip up the player, and as the designer, you have to anticipate that and make sure that the player has a good time.
So, kind of talking of design, are there any kind of tips that you give people they might have an idea in their mind for making an adventure game, an Adventuron? Any tips that you give them on things to look out for in the design stages?
Yeah, I've actually written a blog post called Text Adventure Game Design in 2020, which is on Medium. So you can check that out. But to summarize, you shouldn't have a barren game. Like a game that's too large, that's very empty, frustrates the player. If you have too many things in the world that do nothing, it's great to have things inside your world, but if every time you interact with them, it says you can't do that, that's a bad experience for the player. To expect that the player can mind read like a weird solution to a puzzle, that's bad design. So that there are all these kind of points that you should consider if you're writing a modern text adventure game. It's very easy to write a bad text adventure game, but with a little bit of work, it's not too hard to write a good adventure game.
I think as well, kind of thinking how the player's going to experience the game is probably an important point. We've talked to people before who've worked for big software companies on games, but they kind of get their head that into the game and they're playing it every single day. They assume that the player's going to have the same knowledge of the game that they do, but obviously when someone with new eyes is coming to it, it's like a completely different experience.
Yeah, I think any noun in your game, you have to think about every verb that refers to that. So firstly is think about your nouns and think about your verbs, and then go to the beta testers and confirm that your assumptions are correct, because it's good to mind read the player, but in truth, you can't mind read everybody. Different people are going to have different experiences. But if in general, the game responds in a good way to most things that you type, most people are forgiving.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Dad, if I've said that correctly.
Dad.
Dad. Okay. It's another text adventure creator, but this has interesting roots. It was found in an attic, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I'm not 100% familiar with the story of how it was found, but I believe there were a number of discs that were discovered, and then Spanish users had them for a little while, and they were making text adventures in Spanish language. Then a gentleman named Stefan Vogt went straight to Tim and got access to the English version of the interpreter. So now there are Spanish versions of the interpreter and English versions of the interpreter.
And that's kind of had a recent revival as well, and there's a few people making titles for that adventure writer.
Yeah, that's correct. So Dart actually operates on text files, so you can compile a Dart text adventure game from the command line. And the great thing about Dart is that it targets a lot of retro systems. So if you have a Dart text adventure, you can target Amiga, Commodore 64, Spectrum, Amstrad. So it's a really, really nice cross-platform text adventure authoring system, and it's very, very small. I think the executable is like 11 or 12K.
So you can write it and then basically output it to all of these cross-compile.
Yeah, it's not straight through for every platform. You have to account for how much text can fit on different platform screens. So it's a little bit tricky in some ways, but it's not too tricky. And actually, Adventuron can output certain types of text adventure if you operate in 8-bit compatibility mode, which is what I call it, but technically it can work on Amiga as well. If you operate in that mode, you can export some Adventuron text adventures to Dart, so you can play your Adventuron text adventures on Spectrum, and even the new Spectrum Next that's supported.
Oh, I've just backed the Spectrum Next. I know exactly what I'm going to do when it arrives now.
Yeah.
Play one of my old dirty text adventures.
Yeah, Ravi's Houses of Parliament text adventure. I'm going to get that on there. Well, actually, the Spectrum Next is a very interesting platform. It's obviously been like a modern retro platform. I mean, what's kind of the adventure game scene like at the moment on retro systems and these kind of new ones that are coming out?
I think it's really kind of kicking off. Retro text adventures are really taking off at the moment because you have systems like Dart. There's another system called Osmu on Commodore 64, which is a Z-Machine interpreter, and Z-Machine is the virtual machine that was used by Infocom. And there is a system called Puny Inform, which will allow you to write games that target anything with an Infocom interpreter. So it's really, really, the community is building at the moment, and there are lots of games on the horizon.
Well, Chris, it's been amazing to get your memories of text adventure games, and also if people want to get started with Adventuron, I'll put a link in our show notes, and obviously to that Medium blog that you mentioned as well. I mean, what's kind of your plans for Adventuron? Where do you want to take it in the future?
Well, I'm looking at improving it and adding better gamebook support, auto maps, better visual development tools, more accessible, and hopefully it's going to take off in education.
Yeah, I think, if there's anything guaranteed to get kids' minds fired up, I think even today, you talk about all the distractions kids have got and having the internet and games consoles and everything. I think, actually making a game yourself and putting your own story onto a screen that you can get other people to play, there is still something magical about that experience, I imagine.
I think so.
Excellent. Let's keep text adventures alive, Chris. It's nice to talk to you.
All right. Thank you very much.